Hey there, and welcome to the UkeStuff channel, and welcome to this full UkeGuide review of this instrument. This is the Rogue RU-12 Soprano Ukulele that used to be on sale at Guitar Center and Guitar Center stores alike. It was a very inexpensive ukulele. I looked at one in a store at one point and was very critical of it, and eventually found one on shopgoodwill.com for a very affordable price that I then ordered. It needed to have a string replaced, so I replaced them all with fluorocarbon strings. So do keep that in mind as you watch this video, is that it does have much better strings than the original model came with. And it also came with what I believe is its original gig bag, which is kind of cool. It's a vinyl gig bag. There is no pocket, so that's the negative. There is no back strap, but it's kind of a cool retro vinyl gig bag that it comes with that I really overall like. I mean, the gig bag could be better, as could the instrument, as we'll talk about, but ultimately, it's better than I thought. It's better than I thought, and yes, it would probably need a sub, and we'll get into that in this review. Now, before we go any further, if you want to support this channel, there are three things you can do. First of all, you can like this video. Second, you can subscribe to the channel, and third, you can always say thank you to me for providing this content by making a donation at buymeacoffee.com/ukestuff. All right, what we're going to do in this video is, first of all, we're going to look at subjective categories that I look at with all instruments. Then we're going to look at the specifications, and then I will summarize this ukulele and give it a UkeGuide rating out of 5 possible ukuleles. So let's begin with the subjective categories. First of all, cost. These were around $40, and they are no longer in Guitar Center stores or the Guitar Center family stores like Musician's Friend and things like that, Woodwind Brasswind, for example. So I don't think you can find these new anymore. And there's probably a really good reason for that, which is Guitar Center carries its own Mitchell brand. And its lowest cost Mitchells are in the range of this, and probably a slightly better instrument, especially for beginners, with versus the friction tuning pegs that came with these versus the geared tuners that come with the Mitchell ukuleles. So ultimately, it probably made sense for Guitar Center to get out of that category with Rogue. I still see some other Rogue instruments from time to time, like mandolins and banjos, but not the ukuleles anymore. They don't even show up in the search. So about $40. The value, I think, was about right, because you would have to spend some time getting them set up, I think, to play right. The action is pretty high at the first fret. It's not terrible at the 12th, but it's pretty high, and it pulls this instrument out of tune a little bit as you play it, which is something that I will have to address here in the near future on this one before I either whatever I decide to do with it. It's not an instrument that you really probably want to give away to a beginner because of the friction tuning pegs. And again, yeah, friction tuning pegs are great. These actually work. There's no cardboard in there, so they're actually metal and plastic as most brands. But at the same time, they are more fiddly to deal with than just a geared tuner. So probably not something you want to give to a new starter right away. Friction pegs in the world of geared tuners that exists today. So the value probably meets the value. In terms of build quality, well, there are flaws, and you can see it just in the quality of the laminate, like weird things like that. You can just see, just overall construction is not perfect. You know, really strange joint in the head here. It isn't on both sides. I don't know. But again, there's nothing critically wrong here, but you certainly don't have a flawless build here. But it works. It works. The laminate is thick and heavy. That's probably the biggest issue. If they would have chosen a little bit better laminate, I think this would have been a game changer, maybe in different tuners for a beginner instrument. But let's take a look at the inside of the instrument. Looking at the tail block, it does have a tail block. So you can see it's a very gluey build. There is no kerfing of any kind. Especially on the sides, you can see that strips of laminate were used. I mean, it's functional, but you can see the glue. And there is no bridge support plate. That's unusual with most ukuleles. Usually there's a bridge support plate. That really thick laminate probably does not help. You can see one of the horizontal braces there. There is a spot over here on the side, if I can get to it on the way. Look at all that glue. Right there that has a big ding in it. Big scratch, or almost like a hole on the side of the laminate there. All right, looking at the upper bout here, you can see the neck block there with a lot of glue over there. No notch kerfing, another horizontal brace. Really, I mean, it's a functional build, but it's not really that pretty, and a lot of excess glue with, again, lower quality laminate. And that is our quick look at the inside of the Rogue RU-12 or the RU-12 ukulele. All right, now that we've looked at the inside of the ukulele, let's talk about appearance. From a distance, it doesn't look too bad, but the color here does not match the color of the body, so that's problematic. The color of the whole neck actually doesn't match the body, which is kind of weird. But as you get closer, you can just sort of see the quality kind of dive down. So from a distance, it doesn't look so bad, but when you get up close, it really becomes apparent that it is a lower quality instrument. There's really nothing special about the appearance. There's a transfer rosette that isn't applied symmetrically around the sound hole, so it's closer at the top than it is on the bottom, so it's kind of shifted down. And you know, it isn't scratchy, but you can see the lines of the laminate on the inside and on the outside as well of the instrument. So yeah, it's just not a pretty instrument up close. In terms of availability, these are no longer available new, and while there are a bunch of them out there, not sure that you'll find them readily and necessarily that you'll want to invest in them either. As it comes into playability, however, there's some good and bad things here. It is a very thin nut, again a 35 millimeter nut, which is pretty common, but the spacing is even tighter than that, than normal. But it is a super thin neck, and it appears to be a radius fretboard. I mean, not only is the saddle radiused, but it sure looks like the frets all are radiused as well. So oddly, it was a $40 instrument with lower quality laminate, with a beautifully shaped neck, and a radius fretboard. What a weird combination, and friction tuning pegs. So this instrument could have been really, really good with better laminate and maybe different tuners. This could have been a home run, and Rogue could have sold hundreds of thousands of these things with just a few changes and for a few bucks more, and just, you know, done really, really, really well with it. Maybe they'll consider it and bring it back with some minor changes and make it really into a good instrument. It could happen. It could happen. Now, in terms of sound quality, it's not great laminate, and that's going to impact it the most. It does sort of a boxy sound, but with the fluorocarbon strings that are on here, I've got Martin M600s on here. It has some high-end overtones, some high-end harmonics happening. Yeah, it's a high G that's really popping out for me here. Now, is this ever going to match a solid top instrument or like a Koaloha or a Kamaka? The answer is no. But it isn't displeasing. And the biggest thing you're going to want to fix is the action to help with intonation a bit as you're playing. But once you get that, and a wider neck would be nice too, but really, it's a pretty pleasing sound for such a cheap, inexpensive, and low-cost ukulele. I mean, in terms of cost, in terms of like materials, more than the actual cost of the instrument. So overall, it's got good volume for a cheap laminate ukulele. I do wonder how good it could have been potentially. The tone is dark and boxy, but there is some sustain. especially on the low end, and some high harmonics occurring as well. Now, one of the things I do in these videos is I let you see what I'm hearing with the app Tonal Energy Tuner. So let me open that here on my iPad, and I play generally the most open chords that I can, for example, on G, C, E, A, a C chord, and let you see what I'm hearing. So here it is. Here it is, the Rogue RU-12. Yeah, so there's some pretty good sustain there, a little bit of overtones, harmonics. Yeah, not a bad sound for such an inexpensive ukulele. I've played much, much worse. So yeah, how good could have this been? Pretty amazing to think about. All right, now that we've talked about the subjective categories, let's get into the specifications. It is a soprano scale ukulele with a scale length from nut to saddle of 13.375 inches. It has 15 frets with 12 to the body, and it does not have side position markers. And as a side note, the highest score that an instrument can get on this channel in these reviews is a 3 out of 5 if it doesn't have side position markers. I think that's a necessity in today's market. And this instrument was around as recently as a year ago, so I don't know when it was discontinued, well within my time frame of requiring an instrument to have side position markers to get more than a 3.0. The body style is a traditional double bout, sort of actually a thicker waist on it. The soundboard appears to be laminate mahogany. The back and sides appear to be laminate mahogany. The fretboard appears to be rosewood, and it has a slotted bridge that might be rosewood. It's a slightly different color, which I also don't like. I like these two to match most frequently, unless you're doing something really kind of crazy with your instrument. And it is a slotted bridge down here, so string changes are pretty easy for a beginner, which is awkward with friction tuners, which we'll get to. The fretboard does appear to be radius, which is just crazy. The nut and saddle are clearly plastic. The saddle is clearly radiused as well. It's not compensated, but it is curved to match the curvature of the fretboard, which is kind of neat. It's a satin finish, sort of a flat satin, more of a matte, sort of shiny finish. The overall length is 20.5 inches and it weighs 12.8 ounces, so it's super, super light. It has friction tuners that actually work, and there's no cardboard in there. It's plastic on metal, like many of the other friction tuners that are out there. The action at the first fret is a little bit lower than 1 millimeter, so that needs to be taken down. That is pulling some chords out of tune. The action at the 12th fret is 2.75 millimeters, which is just on the edge of being too high, but I have a feeling that when I take down the nut, that'll be enough to lower the action at the 12th, and if not, there is room to sand down the saddle as well. The width of the nut is 35.51 millimeters, and string spacing, though, is tighter than that. So they give you a lot of space on the sides of the first and fourth strings. So between each string, it's 8.47 millimeters, 27.97 millimeters G to A. So it's pretty tight when you're playing there. Now, I do love this neck. I wish it was a little wider, but I love the shape of the neck. And it is only 17.75 millimeters from the top of the strings at the third fret to the bottom of the neck. And that's even with high action on the strings. That's one of the lowest measurements I've taken in these reviews, more than 100 ukuleles. So the neck is really thin and it has a really nice shape. So once again, we get this category of instrument with some great features that you just can't believe with cheap laminate and friction tuners that could have been so much better. And it makes you want to find out who owned Rogue and see if we can get them to rethink this instrument a little bit and issue it out for another, I don't know, instead of $40, fix some of these things and sell it for $80. And I mean, it would be an absolute amazing instrument with a couple small changes. So something for Rogue or Guitar Center or whoever owns that brand to think about. All right, now that we've talked about the subjective categories and the specifications, let's summarize the instrument and give it a UkeGuide rating. It appears that Rogue Ukuleles, which is a brand that was sold exclusively at Guitar Center family companies, is no longer available. I do have to admit, I saw one of these in the wild, in a Guitar Center, and played it and did not like it at all. I was biased really against the cheap laminate and against the friction tuners. Not because I'm against friction tuners. Friction tuners are fine, but on a beginner instrument, it's problematic, especially when we have geared tuners that are available everywhere today. So it isn't a good connect to have friction tuners with a instrument that's made for beginners today, if that makes sense, with other features that do make sense for beginners, like a slotted bridge, for example. It's just part of that deal. It isn't a high-end ukulele by any means, and there are quality issues just in the build. Not fatal, but just messy and, thick, cheap laminate. But it works as an ukulele with a little bit of a boxy sound, high action, and admittedly not a bad tone, with a really nice shaped neck and a radius fretboard. It's something. And then with better strings, I think that these Martin M600s are probably going to be better than what it came with by a factor of probably 20. So if you have one of these, the first thing I would do is remove the old strings and put on maybe like a set of clear fluorocarbons and see what you think. If you find one of these out there and, it's like this one was like $10 or something like that, I think it was literally $10 with shipping. It was one of those or 1 cent shipping deals, and nobody wanted it because, again, it said, the Rogue, and people know that that's a very inexpensive, low quality beginner instrument, even though the label says that they're fine instruments, Rogue fine instruments. This could have been fine. It's not terrible. I have seen far, 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 far worse instruments. And then to include kind of a cool gig bag. Now, again, the gig bag could use a pocket and it could use a back strap, but that vinyl kind of, 1970-esque gig bag is a pretty cool addition as well. All for $40, not too bad. So you'd have to do a setup on it. And again, you do have lower quality materials. It could be better. Absolutely. But if I was going to give it a score, what score would I give it? Well, because of some of the cool features on here, and because the sound isn't terrible, and because it doesn't have any side position markers, I would give this a 3 out of 5 possible ukuleles. And that may seem like a generous score for such a low quality instrument, but it works. It works. And it's something that I would drag along with me and play if I didn't have other decent instruments to play that were far better than this. So yeah, it's kind of a shame it's not available anymore. And if it does come back, man, a little investment into better materials and a couple of nods to a little more clean build on the inside, this could be a real super winner and just kind of clobber the market with features at a slightly higher price point. Something for Rogue perhaps to consider. All right. Thanks so much for joining me for this full UkeGuide review. I am hoping that you're having a great day, and I'll be back soon with some more Uke stuff for you.